Good morning, everyone, and we're so excited to welcome you today to our Learn, Grow, Share Showcase. Today, we're featuring the lifelong gardening programming that our volunteers in Buncombe, Chatham, and Wake County are just doing an amazing job creating and delivering these materials to help people garden better over a lifetime. Now, it's been a little while since we had one of these statewide webinars, so I just wanted to do a quick refresher that the purpose of our Learn, Grow, Share showcase is to celebrate the amazing and impactful local projects that Master Gardener volunteers are delivering locally across the state. So our webinars will be presented by the Master Gardener volunteers and in some cases the extension professionals involved. And we do have past webinars posted online on the EMG internet. We'll mention that at the end of the webinar. And the purpose of this series is to provide opportunities for volunteers and extension professionals to share what they're doing, to learn from each other about these inspiring and impactful projects, to grow connections with other volunteers across the state, and again, to share the ideas for programs and initiatives that other counties may wish to adopt, and particularly these programs and activities that help us achieve the Extension Master Gardener mission, which many of you were a part of our recent survey, which helped us update our mission to really reflect what we are doing across North Carolina. So our mission is to empower North Carolinians to cultivate healthy plants, landscapes, ecosystems, and communities. And we do this through volunteer service that delivers research-based information, educational programming, and community outreach. And the pictures in the middle here reflect our priorities and the things that we feel are most needed in our communities and the ways we can most make a difference with consumer horticulture education. Pollinator health and conservation, creating climate resilient landscapes, promoting sustainable gardening and integrated pest management, food security and human health, and also supporting biodiversity and ecosystem health. So lifelong gardening programming definitely helps achieve this mission. It teaches strategies, techniques, and tools that keep the health and well-being benefits of gardening accessible to everyone as they age. This includes things like physical exercise, having nutritious food that you grew yourself, stress relief and restoration, having a sense of purpose and pride, and creating opportunities for belonging and connectedness in your community. As gardeners, we all know that communities, landscapes, and ecosystems benefit when experienced gardeners are able to keep gardening, and that is the goal of this programming. So we are going to hear today just from some amazing volunteers who are really doing great things in their county with lifelong gardening. So this has definitely met a need in some counties. But we do just want to say we realize this is not going to be the right fit for every county. And with our Learn, Grow, Share showcase, we're not ever saying specifically that everything that we are discussing needs to be adopted in every county, and encourage you to work with your agent to determine if this is a priority in your county. Things you would consider when thinking about whether lifelong gardening is a right fit for your group are the local needs and issues in your county, the volunteers and availability to support a new project, and the existing projects and priorities and how you would balance a new project with what's already going on in your county. And we are really excited to let you know as well that thanks to the dedicated work of our volunteers who will be speaking today, we are developing a statewide source of resources for lifelong gardening. This will include slide sets, both 3 individual parts and a combined version that you can use for longer workshops or one shorter event, evaluation survey so that you can get feedback on what people are learning and how they're using that information, and promotional materials that'll help you promote these workshops and classes that hopefully you'll be delivering. Right now, before we release this statewide, we are seeking groups that wish to offer lifelong gardening in their counties to review and provide feedback on these materials. We have a survey posted, or not a survey, but a Google form posted at the link you see on the screen where you can provide that feedback. We'll also drop that in the chat at the end of the presentation. So we'll get back to that and make that link available to you. So if after today's presentation and kind of running with running these ideas by your agent. If you think your group would like to be part of this review team and test out these materials in your county, we want to hear from you. And I am going to turn it over to Araya April now, who's our Extension Master Gardener Program Assistant. Before that, I just want to say, as our speakers talk about how they are conducting lifelong gardening in their counties, if you have questions, please drop them in the chat. We will be taking short breaks after each presenter to review questions, and then we will have time for more questions, hopefully at the end. So please put your questions in the chat as we go through the presentation. And with that, I will hand it over to Araya.
Thank you. And many thanks to today's presenters. Let me tell you who they are. From Western North Carolina in Buncombe County, we have Extension Agent Alison Arnold and EMG volunteer John Bowen. From Chatham County, we have Extension Agent Matt Jones and EMG volunteer Steve Broscious. And from Wake, we have Extension Agent Deanna Biggio and EMG volunteer Jeannette Lee. Now I'm going to hand it over to Alison and John in Buncombe County to get it going.
Great. Thank you, Araya. Good morning, everybody. My name's Alison Arnold. I'm the Consumer Horticulture Agent here in Buncombe County and coordinator for the Extension Master Gardener program here in the county. You're looking at a cutout of our title slide for our lifelong gardening program, and it basically outlines our objectives, in which we're sharing modifications we can make to our gardens, changes we can make to our behavior, and our tools to keep us gardening for a lifetime. So how did we get started on this? Well, about 4 years ago or so, Wisconsin Master Gardeners came and gave a 2-day Train the Trainer program in our neighboring county over in Haywood County. Fair to say we weren't really looking for a new program, but what we saw really caught our interest and was something we felt we really needed and wanted to share in our own program, our own Master Gardeners and our community. And as a result of that Train the Trainer, a couple of our gardeners became enthused with the possibilities. So how did we get from there to here? And well, Wisconsin was so generous, the Master Gardeners there, in sharing their materials. And that was an excellent start. We had 8 Master Gardeners from Haywood and Buncombe counties combined. And the 2 agents at that time, Sam Marshall was an agent there, and myself, and we all started working on this long process of reworking the Wisconsin program to make it fit our vision and our local community and audiences. So it was quite a process, as John will attest to, and that you'll shortly hear all about. So after some months of working on this, Sam Marshall left as the agent in Haywood County, and it really became clear to us in Buncombe that we should keep working on our own to continue with this. And at that time, we had 5 volunteers working with us. Now we have 3 who are presenters and who continually keep working on massaging the program and looking at different things that we can improve and edit. Those 3 volunteers are Nancy Humphreys, Sue Bumby, and John Bowen. Well, John has been the chief champion for this, and much of the program has his fingerprints on it. And I'd like him to take over here and give you more details. Take it away, John.
Well, thank you very much, Allison. I appreciate that, and welcome everybody here. I have been a master gardener for 6 or 8 years, and through the time there, I've undergone some personal changes. I'm undergoing some issues with my back, had some back surgery, and all of a sudden, I'm finding that lifelong gardening is becoming a personal issue for me. So it's my hope today that as you listen to what we went through, what we're all developing here in the 3 counties, that some of you will be inspired to take this out into your communities, because I know it's a worthwhile program just from personal experience. and I know that we can all benefit from sharing the words about this. One of the things that happened as we went along here is that we learned some valuable lessons. And a couple of those lessons I want to talk about. One lesson might be just kind of something you're all aware of, and that is simply never try to design a PowerPoint by a committee. When you do that, you end up developing that classic camel, which they say is actually a horse designed by a committee. Somebody wants this picture, somebody wants this title, somebody wants this bullet point, somebody wants this caption, and all of a sudden it's going in all directions and you can't zero in on what you really need. So what we found worked best with a program of this size was to turn the PowerPoint over to one person, let them develop it, let them put the pieces together into a consistent package. Then we could critique it, we could tweak it, we could try to improve it, but it had a consistent theme all the way through. And that saved a great deal of consternation along the way. The other lesson is that it's really, really important to get everybody on the same page with a shared vision. I know you're going to say, duh, that's obvious. But again, in a program this big, if there's not a shared vision, there can be some serious distractions and problems and disagreements. So let me give you two examples of what I'm talking about. First example was a simple question: who is our audience for this program? Well, some of us said that we should be focusing on gardeners who are aging in place, becoming less able to do the things in their garden that they've done all along, that are concerned about their physical changes, concerned about their psychological and emotional problems as they deal with that sense of loss of not being able to do what they wanted. And what could we offer to both help them put that off, help them stay active in their gardens, and also deal with those issues that they were having as they realized that they wouldn't be as active in their garden as they wanted to be. The other group of us said that we should try to address all gardens with all kinds of possible physical disabilities, those that had mobility issues, those that had strength issues, and encourage them to be in the garden and keep working in the garden as long as they could. And it sounds like maybe a fine distinction, but it really wasn't. We don't have an active horticultural therapy program here. And helping all gardeners of all physical abilities to garden is moving more over into the horticultural therapy area, and it muddled our message. When we gave our introduction, when we first talked to our audience, we weren't sure who we were talking to. And eventually, those of us who said we should try, in our county at least, to focus on aging gardeners and try to keep them in their garden made more sense. It sharpened the picture. It just made it clearer for us. And because it was clearer for us, then it's clearer for our audience. It doesn't have to be that way. You're going to hear today some different ways to use the program, but that's where we were. The other lesson we learned, the other part of that lesson, is it's important to understand why every slide is in the slide deck. And here's an example. Here's a slide that had information that originally came to us down from the Wisconsin gardeners, and it was about what do you need to take out into the garden? Well, one group of us said, this is the things that you need to have. You need to have a sunscreen. You need to have insect repellent. You need to have water. And we were like your mother talking to you, saying, if you're going to go in the garden, you take this and you take this and you take this. The other group said, hey, that's not our job. Our job is to let people see how they can efficiently plan what they're doing, how they can take the materials they need into the garden, so when they need them, they'll have them at hand. And that group won out. But this simple slide had hours of discussion and hours of disagreement, but it needed to be clear, and the people who were presenting it needed to be clear why this is here so the message doesn't get muddled. A big program, and it's full of complications like that. So how did we actually develop it? What was the actual ongoing part once we had a piece that we were mostly comfortable with? Well, one thing we did that was extremely helpful is we presented the program to groups of our EMG volunteers. They were great for feedback because they understood gardening. They were great for feedback because they liked us. And they were great for being there because they got CE credit. How can you go wrong with that? But it was great to have their feedback before we took it to the public. We wanted it to be good before we went out into the real world. And this was a very helpful way to do that. We realized pretty early on, too, that this was going to be an evolutionary process, that this program was going to keep morphing. And one thing that was really clear, the Wisconsin program ran about 3 hours. Our program ran about 3 hours. And that was simply too much for most venues. Garden clubs can't deal with that. Libraries don't want to deal with that. Most audiences, even if you offer them snacks, don't want to deal with a 3 hour program. So we thought, well, we're probably going to have to handle this as 3 standalone parts. And this is what our table of contents now looks like. Part 1 is about what we call garden basics, things you can do to your garden, to how you think about your garden, to help you stay in that garden. Part 2 is about body basics, which deals with body mechanics, the preparation and getting all your gear ready to go out in the garden, and also how you can do some pretty important tasks like lifting and digging to maintain good ergonomic posture and keep yourself in the garden. Then the third part, which is usually the most popular, is about tools, ergonomically designed tools, modifications to tools, where you can keep those tools working for you rather than against you as you stay in the garden. The 3-part approach worked pretty well. Part 1, garden basics, usually runs about an hour. The body basics usually runs about 30 to 40 minutes. The tools part usually runs about an hour, and it's the most popular. With questions that people keep asking, it can go on beyond that. The other thing that happened when we started presenting this as 3 standalone parts is we had to ask ourselves, how do we integrate these together even though they're standalone? So I found a couple places when I'm doing the garden basics, talking about gardens, that I can incorporate a couple of tools. And it gives people a taste of what else is there. So they say, oh, you're talking about tools. Maybe we should invite you back for another session later just to talk about tools. So it opens the door to help the program proliferate. We also realized in that evolutionary theme that there were going to be changes in the emphasis. The garden basics, the what can you do with your garden, has changed quite a bit because I've come to the realization that half of the issue there really is emotional and psychological. As I look at my garden and what I can't do right now, I am missing that. I am mourning that. And that needs to be acknowledged. People need to be able to say, I'm afraid of what might happen. I'm afraid of what I can't do. I've done this all my life and now I can't. What do I do? So it became partly an exploration of the emotional and support side, and not just how you can change to working with pots or change your mulching material or any of those mechanical sorts of things. In the body basic sections, we decided to add a section about falling because falling is a big issue in the garden. And in the tools, we kind of turned it on its head. Originally, we were talking about ergonomic tools and then tool modifications. It just didn't flow right. And so we started talking about body parts. We started talking about tools that are good for your back, tools that are good for your wrist, tools that are good for your hands. And that body part approach connected everything together in a new way. But we had to be willing to make that evolutionary change. So how has this program been received? Well, it's always a challenge when you're a presenter to ask your audience about what they got out of it. We use assessment forms and the feedback is marginally worthwhile. But we looked at 3 things. First, there was what we call the immediate feedback. That's when you talk to your audience after you're done and you say, well, what did you learn? How was this for you? What was new? And some of the feedback I got was people saying to me, hey, you're talking about my garden. Or, wow, I am really glad to know that I'm not alone in this. I'm not the only person dealing with this. And that tells me that we're meeting a need, we're hitting a target. The second thing I looked at is what I call long-term feedback. That's when you run into a participant a month later and they say, hey, I was in that lifelong gardening program and I I love that tool that you talked about. I got one of those and it's so great. Or one gardener who said one time, I got one of those pot moving caddies that you talked about, and that saved my gardening life. How often do you have a gardener say to you, you saved my gardening life? Again, that tells me there's a real need there. We're hitting a target, and this is worth the time and effort that it takes. The third way that one can assess the reception is what we'll call the word of mouth advertising. We were taking this out to libraries and to garden clubs and to small groups and talking to people about it. And all of a sudden we started getting phone calls, Alison did, from the Alabama Master Gardener Group, wanted me to come down and give their keynote speech at their state convention because they heard it was a good program. The Southern Virginia gardeners did the same thing. They wanted us to come in and give a keynote at their spring event, about 150 people there, because they heard from somebody else that it was a good thing. The garden clubs of North Carolina were having a state meeting here, and they had heard from one of our garden clubs, hey, this is a good thing. Charlotte invited me to the EMG college last year, and it was a great event. I remember that almost as well as being stuck in Raleigh because the hurricane was here in Buncombe County and I couldn't get home. And the last thing that was really amazing is we had a call earlier this year from a group called ACAP, the Adult Children of Aging Parents. And they wanted us to come in and participate in a podcast they were doing. What was neat about that, what was different about that, is that the audience wasn't gardeners who were aging and being concerned about staying in their garden. The audience was the adult children of those gardeners who wanted to know how they could help their gardening parents. I thought, well, that's a different look at the problem. And maybe that opens up a new wrinkle, a new audience that we might be thinking about addressing. Another project for another day, Alison. But those were all effective because we did it in small groups and people said, yes, it's valuable. Yes, it's productive use of my time. Yes, it's something that should be shared. So I take that as a strong affirmation of the value of this program. So perhaps you're getting an idea this is worthwhile and you're wondering, okay, what if we do this? What are we getting ourselves into? How much time is it going to take? Well, the good news is, as Charlotte told you, that a program that you can pilot has already been developed, and you're welcome to take that and work with it and see what you think. For us, in terms of EMG volunteers, 3 volunteers works well for us. We're a relatively small county with relatively fewer venues than some of you will have. And it's really important that our speakers stay sharp, stay proficient. If we have more than 3 speakers, we don't get enough practice time. So 3 is working great, and it's been well for us. More than 3, I think, would just stress us to the point where we wouldn't get the practice that we really need. But what about the time for those 3 volunteers? What's expected there? And here's my caution. As we address this program, it's not a program in a box. It's not something that you can just pull out and go, bam, we're out there. The slides that we've developed are not information dumps. They're placekeepers for somebody who knows their program, who's telling their personal stories, who's getting intimately involved in what's there, and that takes practice. I am an experienced presenter. I know this program really, really well. And if I go out to present one of the parts, I personally will probably spend 2 to 3 hours in just thinking about it, prepping it, reviewing my stories, talking it through in my mind, maybe talking part of it through out loud. 2 to 3 hours for me, plus the time for the delivery and the logistics of picking up the tools and taking them back and all these sort of things. So it's not just a quick instant bing, you're done. A new speaker coming in, I think, would probably expect to spend 8 to 10 hours of prep time looking at the material, practicing the material themselves, making up their stories, putting in some of the slides that tell their story, making it their own. And then we would want them to do 2 or 3 practice sessions with us or with master gardeners because we want people to be proficient. We think our audiences deserve people that are proficient. And if the program is going to propagate itself through word of mouth, we need to develop a quality product and deliver it to those audiences. So for a new speaker, it's definitely a time commitment. It's not something you want to put in if you're going to do this program one time. You need to be prepared to do it more than once just to make it worthwhile. So it's a new program, new speakers in it. There's a lot to learn. There's a lot to practice, and it's absolutely worthwhile. So how does a program like this fit in with the other consumer horticulture activities? Well, in our county, the program is I think of it as being standalone. We have no outside collaboration. We're not connected to community gardens. We're not connected to any kind of a senior care facility or any kind of a horticulture support group there. So it's only coming out through the Master Gardener program. As I mentioned, we don't have an active horticultural therapy program here, and that would be a good tie-in if you did. We just haven't had the people to develop it. And again, a small county, that's harder to do. So for us, the program is part of our Speakers Bureau, and we consider it part of community outreach. Our primary target is garden clubs, libraries, and we hope from there maybe it proliferates out to some bigger events. We at our Extension office have a demonstration learning garden, which is a pretty good sized garden. And it's possible there could be some way to integrate that with the learning garden, that we could get the learning garden people to use ergonomically appropriate tools and talk about them on demonstration days. That would be a big extension of this program. And I think it's one that we can safely say right now, Alison, don't think we're going to do it, that we have the bandwidth to take that out to the learning garden. But I think about it, I dream about it, it could possibly integrate that way. So we have challenges, we have solutions coming up here, and I want Alison to take over again and let her kind of wrap up what we said and give you some good final words on this. So Alison, you're on here.
Thank you, John. Yeah, so one challenge is working with the program so it makes sense to everyone while letting it grow and develop. Gardening isn't static and programming isn't either. So developing it was a little tumultuous. There were strong opinions and somehow we avoided bloodshed. And a challenge will be letting it grow onwards and develop. It's a challenge finding good presenters and getting them up to speed. It's a challenge in all of our public programs, not just this one. And this one takes on a serious time commitment. So there's a learning curve there that we work with our gardeners on. It's been an ongoing challenge adjusting the program to the available time slots, especially for garden clubs. And we can't always make it work because many clubs, as you know, want a 15 to 20-minute program before their business meeting and their social time. So we can't always make it work. And lastly, because Buncombe County is relatively small, for venues, it's an ongoing challenge to find new venues and new audiences to keep our presenters sharp and focused. And John did go over that. So given the challenges, how can we sustain the program? Well, it needs to stay lively and it needs to keep evolving as we get better feedback from our audiences. We will need to recruit new presenters over time. We'll need new venues for presentation, and this becomes a double issue of marketing the program effectively and making it fit the widest possible range of venues. And of course, one way to help make that happen is to work with all of you across the state, sharing good ideas and materials. So how can we support you in other counties? We realize it's a big program and a challenge for smaller counties. We can share content and ideas, and Charlotte and Arroyo will have more to say about this and the statewide Speakers Bureau resources and the process of moving forward on a statewide basis. We're willing to come and present the program with you and for you in our nearby counties. We can offer feedback and suggestions on your programs if you wish. So here's a couple of important links that may help you. This is our lifelong gardening resource page that we have on our buncomemastergardener.org website, and emails for both me and John. And we'd love to talk further about this program with you if you want that. So Araya, what questions do we have in the chat box for us?
Thank you, Alison. Thank you, John. Charlotte, anything rising to the top?
We haven't had any questions posted in chat, so I would encourage everybody to do that. But I actually have a question based on some of the things I know about the amazing work you guys have been doing, John. Could you tell us a little bit about the workshop you did, I believe it was last year, 2024, maybe it was 2023, that actually inspired our other groups who are going to be talking today to get involved in this programming?
Oh, I would love to. Because of Charlotte's interest in having this spread around the state and some of the other counties' interest, we put on a Train the Trainer program. And it was a full day event. It was a workshop for everybody who wanted to come in. I think we had about 25 or 30 people there at the Train the Trainer. And the idea was for us who were familiar with this program to go through the program and let people see what it was. And then I, as the master of ceremonies, as this, I was the annoying person who would stop the presenters in mid-sentence and say, okay, trainer tip, why did they do that? Or why didn't they do that? Or how might they do this differently? So the idea was twofold. It was first to let people who are interested in the program see the whole program, but also to give them some tips on the things that we learned the hard way of what works and what doesn't work. And some of our presenters were a little more proficient at their part than others, and that's the way it works in a real program. We put together a book that had some general presenter tips that I've learned the hard way over the years. It had some guides to the tool we used. It had copies of the slides. It had as much material as we were able to share at that time. We shared, and I think at the end of the day, I think people said that it was absolutely exhausting and absolutely worthwhile. And I think your next two presenters here today are going to tell you that it got them started on a pathway, and they're taking it now in a direction that makes sense to them. They took what we offered and said, we're going to make it our own. And that was the goal. It was to plant the seeds as we do as gardeners and see that grow into a forest of people sharing the idea.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you, John. We did have a question come in, and I'd like to address a couple of points to it before turning it over, John, for you to provide any additional feedback. But the question is, would you define horticultural therapy and how it differs from what you're doing? And I just wanted to add, I've had several conversations with Amy Bruzacchese, who's our therapeutic horticulture program manager for NC State Extension. She's based in the horticultural science department. And, since she's come on board, I've learned a lot more about how is just normal sustainable gardening programming different from therapeutic horticulture. And one thing I should note too, when we talk about horticultural therapy, that is more of somebody who is a certified therapist is leading the program. So when we are delivering similar or related programming through Extension Master Gardener Program or Extension in general, we kind of turn that around and call it therapeutic horticulture. Our focus is on horticulture. That's where our knowledge and expertise are, and we're doing it in a therapeutic way. But Amy has a great way of explaining this, where it's when you're talking about therapeutic horticulture and horticultural therapy, you're focusing more on individuals' needs. So people who have maybe special needs beyond a general population due to, arthritis or due to, I know a group once when I was the agent in New Hanover County, they have a therapeutic horticulture program. They worked with a group of people who had brain injury. So they're targeting specific needs and using horticulture as a medium to provide therapy for those needs. But as John said, this program, and I'll let you, extend this, John, but you said this program is just targeted to aging gardeners. So just average everyday needs of aging gardeners.
I think that's a fair assessment, Charlotte. And I know I always have to try to wrap my brain around those two terms, horticultural therapy and therapeutic horticulture. And the question is the emphasis on the horticulture or is the emphasis on the therapy? And we are absolutely staying away from the therapy part because, again, we don't have the training in that, and that's very specialized. And so in terms of just thinking about talking to people who are having issues, people are having back issues, people who are having wrist issues, have arthritis in their hands and they can't grip their pruners. To that extent, we're providing some, not therapy in the medical sense, we're providing some practical suggestions for how to make that work. And that really meshes with the the broader picture, but it's not really our goal. And it's a fine distinction. I think if we had a group here that was really, we did have at one time a group that was working with the VA hospital, and they were out doing gardening and interacting with the people that were living in the VA facility and helping them with gardening jobs. If that was an active group, if that was going on actively, I think there would be more overlap. And so it's really not at all a sharp line. And I know we kind of bob and weave our way through it, but really our focus is on the gardening and what can we do to help you keep gardening, not necessarily try to use that gardening as a therapy. That's not really a great answer to the question, except they're closely related, and we are careful to make sure that we are not doctors and do not play them on video.
Excellent. Thank you, John. I think we'll wrap up our questions for now for this session and move forward with our next presenter. But I do want to say thank you to John and his team for the amazing work they are doing and just for bringing this programming to North Carolina.
Thank you.
Thank you, John. Thank you, Allison. Now we're going to kick it over to Steve Broscious, who's an Extension Master Gardener volunteer in Chatham County.
Yeah, thank you very much, Araya. Glad to be here, and thanks everyone for joining us. Before I get into the lifelong gardening piece, a little bit about Steve. That's me. I retired 3 years ago from a career in the crop protection industry, and so I'm familiar with agriculture and started in on becoming a master gardener. And I graduated, I guess, December of 2024. So I haven't been doing this all that long in terms of the master gardening piece, but huge believer in community service. You know, once a week I'm out with Habitat for Humanity construction crew, and you will see me loading groceries at our local food bank. So that's kind of a little bit about, you know, what I do as far as community service. Okay, let's see. Personal interests. One of my passionate hobbies is photography, and here's a couple examples of things that I have taken pictures of. So I like landscape, I like street photography, and lower right there we have what I call nature still lifes. And in addition, we're having slow uptake on the slides movement here. I'm also about a year in rocking the grandpa scene, and I like to run, love to play pickleball. My wife says I play too much pickleball, but as all of you pickleballers out there know, there's never too much pickleball, right? But let's get into it and talk about, you know, what do we want to cover here and why are we doing this? I think the goal here has been said a couple times, but the idea is we want to inspire you all to maybe add or expand some element of lifelong gardening programming into your offering to your community. And the way we're going to do that, the way I'm going to do that, is we're going to take a trip. We're going to highlight the trip that the Chatham County group took in terms of developing a lifelong gardening program, and share with you some of the challenges, some of the things that, you know, the way we do it, a little bit different than some other areas, some of the things we've accomplished. And again, the whole thing is we want to take you into a space where you're thinking more relevantly about, you know, putting your foot into the LG community offering. So why did we do the programming? I had a huge smile on my face when John was talking about the Train the Trainer program that Buncombe County ran for us. It was intense. It was like drinking from a fire hose. We were tired, as he said, but we were super inspired. And I say we because we had a group of people from Chatham that were in that training. But going through that whole thing, the content in the lifelong gardening program, to me, fits this fundamental feeling that I have about, you know, the EMG program is about community service. And hey, here's an opportunity to, you know, to be able to take that to the community. So those are the high level reasons we did it. Below that, you know, I was a trainee at that point, and Chatham County requires each graduate to have a project. And so I got the opportunity to kind of organize the 5 folks that were from Chatham County that took that Train the Trainer program. So they had the other EMGs in Chatham had an interest. I needed a project, so I became de facto kind of a team lead, if you will, in terms of moving that forward and making it our own. So the team, the training was June 4th, 2024. There were 5 of us. You see that, their names in black text. Not everyone is still working on the team because of various reasons, but we have made additions to the team. And so what you see here is a team that's kind of in constant flux. And we have some core presenters that are the ones that are comfortable going out and doing the presentation, and we have other folks that we're trying to develop them, bring them along, get them comfortable with the content, and have the confidence to be able to go out into the public and make that. So it's kind of like we're rotating, trying to always have a bench available that we can draw from to meet the needs of the community. When we started the group, somebody had the brilliant idea that said, hey, we really need to have some kind of a mission statement or a North Star that we can validate our content, and the things that we develop should be consistent. We should all be on the same page as far as what we're trying to accomplish here. And what we came up with was that the goal of the group is to take ideas, techniques, tools, bring them educationally to the public, so that when we have a community, a segment of our population that is realizing life changes, that gardening will still be accessible, all the joys and all the benefits that come from gardening, we can help make them continue to realize those positive things. And we also came up with a target audience statement. So you can read this here. Basically, people who are or may soon lose their ability or their access to gardening due to age and physical changes. So those were kind of our core mission and target audience statements. As far as the content that we offer, you've seen these 3 topics before. It comes from the same lineage. The details within it may have changed a little bit. I'm not going to say a whole lot about it, other than the fact that we work within this framework, and then we develop customized programs, and I'll get into a little more detail about how we do that in a minute. One thing we do consistently, no matter what the topic is, the length of the program, is we always start by making a statement to the audience to say, please make a mental checklist, write down on a piece of paper things that you find interesting that you may want to incorporate into your activities in the garden. So we want to actively put that out there so that they're, can be hopefully a little bit more attentive and thinking about where those golden nuggets will be. We also then close the session by saying, okay, now you've heard a lot of information. Can we hear from you? Can you tell us what were the highlights? What are those things that really struck a chord with you? And this does a couple things. One, it kind of frames back up some of the key points, and we try to engage in a dialogue. So we're reiterating. And again, we always try to create the presentation or the program around a back and forth dialogue with the audience. It's much more, I'm going to say, it's fun to do because you actually get input from the audience that can reinforce or expand everybody's knowledge in that room, not just the presenter, but the audience. Everyone wins. So when we craft a program, I guess the range of types of presentations we do, very flexible. We're really focused on meeting the needs of our audience. Now, that takes a little bit of work up front, but that's kind of how we do it. So what it could range anywhere from a single topic, and generally these are about 35, 40 minutes, and then you have questions and it may run an hour. On the other end of the spectrum, we could take, and we've done this at the Chatham Ag Center, is we've run a registered pay-for-play workshop that goes over all topics again, about the same time frame, but you end up spending, the better part of a morning going through that. And then we have the hybrids in between where you might focus on mind and body, or you changes to the garden, sprinkle in a little mind and body. So maybe that goes an hour and a half. Again, my point being that we try to work with the audience and the leaders of those groups to say, hey, what is it that you need? What would you like us to talk about? And how much time do we have? The profiles for our audience are probably the usual suspects, I suppose. Be garden clubs, senior centers, libraries. I mentioned we had the registered training, and we did work with an HOA group that wasn't really garden focused. So there are all kinds of opportunities for outlets to meet and educate the public. Last year, or well, this year so far, we've had 8 sessions, 140 people. Audience size could range from 2 up to 3 dozen. I have to tell you as an aside, when we went to the library and there was only 2 or 3 people in the audience, my heart sank. I'm like, oh my God, what do we do? This is not good. But I was wrong. I was totally wrong, because the amount of interaction and the level of engagement, the richness of the exchange of ideas when we have that small audience it's just wonderful to experience. And so I would say, approach it with, the idea that the audience size is probably, or sorry, the amount of communication and learning and interaction is inversely proportional to the audience size. So big audiences maybe don't learn as much as we do with smaller audiences. As far as feedback, I would say overall it's positive. We've had, comments. We do have surveys that we actually make a verbal survey at the end. What did you learn, and are you going to change your gardening habits? Those kinds of things. We've also had repeat customers, so to speak. I don't like to use that word, but where we've gone to the same venue, same different topics, and we're also planning with some of the garden clubs to continue this series with different topics in the future. So that's all good. How did we create it? Well, I think I would have to say we copied and pasted with pride, and I'm not ashamed to say that. The Buncombe and the Wake County products, or say the slides and content that they had, we relied heavily on those. As John said, I think we needed to make some customizations and do some things that made us, made sense to us, made us feel comfortable talking about that. I think in the situation we're faced with now is, as has been mentioned by Charlotte and Araya, really great effort to bring together the available content and get it into a format that you can work with. And so you have a starting point, you have a foundation to work from. And I would suggest that, as Charlotte said, that'd be the perfect starting point for you. We also found that there are other, I guess, extension groups, and this is a couple examples from Gabby Mirza at Utah State University. And just by taking an online workshop and dialoguing with her, the photo on the left is a poster that she put together on full body stretches. And she said, yes, please use that. On the far right, you see there's a YouTube video, 2 to 4 minutes. This is one on shoveling, how to lift. She's got a number of those things. My point is there are a number of other resources, and our group in Chatham is always looking at what else is there that we might want to incorporate to broaden our footprint of content. So again, on the topic of creating content, even though we had Buncombe and Wake's slides and we'd gone through the training, it was a group of people. It was a team, and there's positives to teams, and then there's some challenges that teams present. So trying to get 5 people going in a common direction, trying to create an atmosphere where everyone felt like they could contribute, even if they had ideas that may have been different than what others had said. And so it just took time for us to meet together, work on the mission statement, some of those things. But as John mentioned, PowerPoint by committee is certainly not a fun exercise, is what I would say. So what we ended up doing was we broke it down, and we had sub-teams. So one or two people would take a topic and then work on that together. And we felt like, that worked really well. Other thing I would say is, while we have the three broad topics, you don't have to do all of them. Pick one that you feel comfortable with, you think might, most likely to meet the needs of your constituents. And then again, I guess maybe new topics is always a possibility. John mentioned it, I'll reiterate it. You have to practice. Practice, practice, practice. I think there was going to be a team mutiny and I was going to be thrown overboard, but we got through that. And we practiced amongst ourselves, I guess is where it starts. Then we started, and our horticultural agent, Matt Jones, we presented it to him, got some feedback. And then again, following John's suggestion, we took a program to the rest of the EMGs in Chatham County. So at our monthly meeting, we took and basically a little over an hour to go through and explain, do a mini version of what we're doing. And the benefit of that was, one, more practice. Two, the rest of the EMGs knew what we were doing. And probably some of the people joined the team once they knew that something like this was happening. And then they also were able to give us feedback, and they have networks into garden clubs. And so we were able to generate a prospective list of places we could go to bring our message. So we did all that before we went live. So practice, practice, practice. I would say, but don't hesitate, because I think the fear of getting it perfect, and sometimes being apprehensive about how your presentation skills, you certainly need to practice. But I would say that it's important that you not hold back too long. Put in the hard work and then get out there, and you can always reiterate and refine. So I'm not moving again. Challenges and solutions. We'll quickly here, I guess, taking that big first step, I think for us was a challenge. And again, it's just a matter of doing the hard work, and you'll get there. It just keep nose to the grindstone. One of the things that I found as the team lead is that there's a significant amount of administrative time that gets consumed, if you will, in terms of scheduling and promoting the program and working with the audience program coordinators. And I think probably being candid, we might want to look at changing that and sharing some of that responsibility across the team. Volunteer team dynamics. This is again something that, coming from a corporate world, people on the team are volunteers, and that's by nature they may have different priorities, different pacing than you or the other members of the team. And there's so you just, again, the bigger the team, the more of those things you're going to have to work through. But I think if you realize that, again, that this is something that is normal, and you're just patient and give people the right environment to work, I think you have really going to not have big problems with that. Not advancing. Okay. Yeah, the last point, I guess, here on challenges is we were fortunate in Chatham that we had a set of tools to work with, but we did find that the storage, they're in my garage right now, and transport and being able to keep them together is a little bit of a challenge. And you can see the photo there on the right is, that's what we use. So you can throw that in the back of your car, and those two items pretty much have everything that we need. And we can move them in and out of the venue pretty easily. So that's that. All right. Are we willing to help other EMG programs? Absolutely. That's why I'm here. Again, I think the first starting point is this Speakers Bureau slide sets on LLG. They're going to be getting vetted, and your feedback will be helpful. I think that the Chatham LLG team is here and ready to help. If you have questions, you want to meet, you want to do a Zoom, we're happy to do that. I think we could have you or some of the EMGs from other counties come and watch us do what we do. We are planning, we don't have it on the calendar yet, but we'll do another workshop at the Chatham Ag Center. So that'll be soup to nuts, full morning. And we also would entertain the possibility, and John, I think, mentioned this too, is, if you want us to come, you have a group of people that you'd like us to, let's talk about that. And I'm sure there's other ideas that you all have, and anything and everything is on the table in terms of collaborating, if you will, to try to make something happen around LLG in your county. So at this point, I think I'm out of breath, but as we always like to close, is my question to you is, did you hear something that you found interesting that might make you work with your horticultural agent to say, hey, this is, let's talk about LLG. Is there a place for it in our county? And if there is, then certainly let myself or Matt Jones know that, and we'd be happy to talk about it. So I'm going to stop there, and I think Charlotte's going to mediate the questions if we have some.
Yes, thank you, Steve. Thank you for sharing all of those excellent tips and knowledge based on your experience. We did have a request for a link to the Utah stretching slide, not the handout that you had on your slide, from Utah Extension about stretches. And I would say, if you don't have that right at a click, if you'll send that to me and Araya, we'll make sure to add that to the resource stock that will be part of the recording and materials that go out following today's webinar. So we'll certainly get that to folks.
There's a QR code on that slide. I don't know if it's still visible, but I can send you that poster. We have a handout that we do on that one, which has the QR code and a list of all the videos. I'll send that to you, Charlotte, and you can package that with the other materials that are available for distribution.
All right, excellent. Thank you, Steve. And I think that's the questions we have for right now. But so I think we'll move forward. But I will say, if you questions are coming to your mind, please put them in the chat. And we have one more group speaking from Wake County, and after that, we'll take a break for a few more questions.
Yeah, thank you both. Thank you, Steve. We're going to hand it over to Jeannette Lee now from Wake County.
And you're muted, Jeannette.
Thank you. Sorry about that. Several of us from Wake County attended the training session last year. It was advertised as a therapeutic horticulture workshop. So a few of us, Nancy Kreitz, who's the team lead of our therapeutic horticulture committee, and I, the co-chair, thought it would be a good idea for us to attend to see if some of the information can be applied to our current therapeutic horticulture activities. One thing that the Buncombe presentation stressed, as we've talked about, is it's lifelong gardening, basically for aging people. But they also emphasize that we could modify or update the presentation based on what we feel comfortable doing and what we decided our audience needs were. So we decided we were going to modify the focus of the presentation and encourage all gardeners, all ages, to continue their gardening throughout life transition, because we thought aging was just one life transition you go through. There's lots of others. So because of that focus, we included some multi-generation images as well as images of children within our slide presentation. In Wake County in the spring, we have a really popular Ready Garden Grow presentation at the libraries about vegetable gardening. So I contacted our library liaison and asked whether they'd be interested in a lifelong gardening presentation. Of course, they said yes. And so they gave me a deadline when I had to commit to doing the various presentations so they would have time to advertise to their clients. So given the deadline, I started working on the presentation and recruiting presenters for that fall. So I was able to reduce the Buncombe presentation by half. On average, our presentation takes about an hour, 15, 20 minutes. We still have all the three segments that you've heard mentioned, the garden basics, the body basics, and the tools. As Extension Master Gardeners, our mission is to encourage everyone to improve their home gardens and their landscaping. So that's why we thought it was important to involve everybody in gardening. So during our presentation introduction, what we emphasize is for you to think about what are your current goals in your garden based on what your current life transitions are. Life transitions, in addition to being aging, maybe you have some work-life balance, or you have family commitments, or you just decide you want to do something different in your garden. So given your goals, when we describe the different garden designs and the tools, different ones will be more effective for you or best fit your needs based on what your goals are in gardening. Most of my time was spent on updating the images with the appropriate copyright statements. If you print a presentation or publish it on the internet, you have to make sure you provide the appropriate copyright attributions. It's a legal problem. If you want more information about that, you can look at the North Carolina Extension Intranet under their education materials for more information. And I'm sure Charlotte can answer your questions too. But that was what a lot of time was spent on, getting the copyright statements correct. And also while I was reviewing other long life garden type presentations, because lots of other states have this also, I came across a presentation with a phrase that I decided to borrow for our motto, and that's make gardening as easy and effective as possible with adaptations and ingenuity, so you will continue gardening throughout your lifetime, regardless of what your life transitions are. As I mentioned, we started presenting in our Wake County libraries last fall. We presented at 6 different libraries, and we also had the opportunity to provide a really quick, brief presentation to a couple of our therapeutic horticulture sites. One was a veterans group. Some of those are visually impaired, some have PTSD. We also presented at a couple of our independent living facilities. We also had the opportunity in this past September 2025, we presented at the Southern Ideal Home Show. We were a little pleasantly surprised by how many people attended that presentation because it was late in the afternoon when a lot of times people were drifting out, going home for dinner. But one day we had 24 people, and the next day we had 38 people attend the presentation. And please note that at the Southern Ideal Home Show, the presentation was labeled as gardening for seniors. So our slide deck is multi-purpose, even though we want to focus and tell people garden regardless of what your life transitions are. That's mostly, you talk about that through the speaker's notes. There's not explicit on any of the text that says that. So the presenter was able to use the same slide deck when there were pictures, like for instance, we had a picture with a child that was using a nursery container to shovel compost. It was very easy for her to say, well, given this image where a child is using a nursery container to shovel mulch, if you have problems due to aging or a physical problem, consider using a nursery pot, just like this child is, if it's difficult or awkward for you to use a shovel. So I think our presentation is multi-purpose. I've included lots of speaker notes, so hopefully the presenter can pick and choose what they feel comfortable, given their audience, what they can talk about. Our tools, we have about 15 physical tools that we were given, thank you to Charlotte from Extension. But in addition to those tools, I also encourage our presenters to bring their favorite tools that they think will be useful to people. And of course, our slide deck has lots more tools that we describe. And even though all our physical tools are not ergonomic, we do caution them and try to describe to them how to properly use any tools that we show them. So it's creating less stress on their body and less fatigue. So, and we mentioned that several times to them that not all of these are ergonomic. And even with the ergonomic tools, they have to try it and decide whether they're comfortable using it. Because some people have found that ergonomic tools are sort of clumsy to use. And so it's personal preference, but at least we explain to them what's good and bad on how to use all different types of tools. With respect to our physical tools that we have, we were able to use them at a couple of our therapeutic sites. We have a special needs group that we work with, and we let them use some of our tools. And also, as you see in this image here, at one of our assisted living sites, we had some of our clients using our tools to populate their raised beds with spring ornamentals. We also had at Awake Gardeners of North Carolina Club, one of our members was in that group, and she presented a show and tell of our tools. And so that was presented to about like 80 people. So hopefully more and more people learn that we do have this presentation available. This year, we are continuing our teaching in our library. As you can see from this present flyer that they created, even though it's got a picture of an older person, the text does clearly state that it's a class for anyone going through different life transitions to come and listen about different garden designs and tools that may be applicable to you. We've added 2 more libraries this year. I'm happy to say that we've done 3 of the libraries so far this year, and the total amount of attendees exceed all 6 libraries that we went to last year. So hopefully it is a popular program and people are beginning to realize it exists. Also, I was excited that we were able to recruit 5 new presenters this year, because even though we get positive feedback from our audience, it's always good to hear what our presenters think of the presentation and get their warm fuzzy about what they thought the audience really was enjoying and not enjoying. At each of our library presentations, we have 2 presenters. One person does the design component, the garden designs and the body mechanics, and then the other presenter does the description of the tools. With respect to presentation prep time, I don't have a really good answer for you. It's as you would guess, it's very dependent on your presenter. Like I just co-presented with a person who said he only spent like 35 minutes prepping, but I trusted him because I knew he had done other similar presentations for community gardens. He also did Ready Garden Grow, and he was an experienced gardener, so it probably didn't take him long to understand what the point of the presentation was. And he just did a fabulous job adding his personal stories as well as doing the presentation itself and addressing any and all questions. And then other presenters I've had, they tell me it takes anywhere from 4 to 6 hours for them to prep for it. So I would say an average then of maybe 3 to 4 hours per person, depending on your comfort level to present, as well as what type of information you're usually used to talking about. So as I mentioned, the audience feedback we've gotten has been positive. They said it met their expectations, the content was good, and the pace of material was good. Tools were often mentioned as the most interesting part of the presentation. We do get questions throughout the presentation, but usually not specifically about the content. We'll just get miscellaneous questions about different plants, like, my trees have overgrown now, and so now I have to figure out what kind of shade plants I can grow. And also over the years, my soil seems to have deteriorated, so what do I do about that? So to address some of those questions, of course, we answered them while we're there, but also to help people when they're not in class later on, if the question comes up again, I've added more slides about the plant toolbox to remind them how to use that so they can answer those questions themselves later on. And we've added a couple more slides about our soil testing process, which is free from April to November. So in general, tool seems to get the most feedback, and there's no specific questions about the other content. Beyond this year, as I mentioned, we have about 5 new presenters. And so I'm anxious to hear what their feedback is on the slide content as well as their interaction with the audience. So given that presentation as well as our audience feedback, that'll help us evaluate what we need to do moving forward, whether we should still continue with the library or just seek other venues to present at. Our speaker bureau has asked us to try to create a smaller presentation because as mentioned, most garden clubs have like a less than an hour limitation. So they want us to see if we can focus on trying to get a smaller presentation for that so that the presenter doesn't have to figure out themselves as they're going through our slide deck which ones to cut out. And as mentioned before, the tool storage is always the challenge. Currently, Nancy and I transport the tools to the presenter. So hopefully we'll come up with a different solution next year to free up some of our time. So as Charlotte has mentioned, they are going to make our presentations available upon request. If you happen to get the Wake County version and you have any questions, feel free to contact us. We can help you either like pare down the presentation if you don't like it or give you suggestions of why we did one, included some speaker notes versus others. And that's all I have. So thank you for your time and consideration of the lifelong gardening solution. Charlotte, do you have any chat questions for any of us?
Yes, thank you, Jeanette. There was a question that came in earlier where someone was asking if anyone's ever recorded these presentations. Do you have any recordings of yourself presenting any of these materials? That's for all of our speakers.
Yeah, I can comment, Charlotte, I have tried, and I've got a couple of recordings in the not all topics, but the whole goal here again is to try to come up with a way that I could say, hey, Araya, would you be willing to present this? Here's a set of slides, speaker's notes, and then complement that with having heard somebody deliver it. And then the idea you have all that, then that person, Araya, could then make her own speaker's notes, having heard somebody deliver it, in addition to just looking at it. So we're working on that. We haven't perfected it yet, and we don't have all the topics, but several of the people on our presenter bench have said, hey, if you had recordings, audio recordings, not video, I'm sorry, I should qualify that they would find that helpful. We just haven't perfected it yet.
Thank you, Steve. Yes, John.
I have made a couple of recordings of a part 1 presentation that we've done and been unwilling to share those for a couple of reasons. One reason is because, as Jeanette pointed out, getting the attribution on the slides, getting the permissions on the slides has been a real challenge for us, and and it's an important legal aspect of this, and we didn't want to share that outside of our local area. As far as video on the other parts, on the part 2, which is the body mechanics, and part 3, which is the tools, I have struggled with that. We do a lot of video for our Gardening in the Mountains program, and the tools that the equipment that we have really requires a video studio to do that, or putting it together in a different sort of way, because it's really hard to show the tools on video. It doesn't lend itself to recording a Zoom presentation, for instance. I would not want to do tools on Zoom because it's too hard to show the tools, and showing the tools is a big part of the program. So because of the legality on the images and the dissatisfaction with the quality of the program we can produce, we have not made anything to share at this point.
All right, thank you, John. So I will say on the recording, just to kind of clarify some of these copyright, issues, it becomes really important to make sure you have permission to use images when you are actually distributing the images themselves. So if you are sharing the PowerPoint presentations, the files, so you're giving your PowerPoint presentation to another person, that's a case where you'd want to make sure, all of the images in there you have permission to use because you're actually distributing those images and that those permissions allow you to distribute them. Also, if you were going to post your presentation itself, either as a PowerPoint or slides file or even a PDF online, you would want to make sure you had permission because again, that's you're putting you're further distributing the images in a way other people could potentially use them. When you're giving a live presentation in front of an audience, you're typically covered by fair use. And I will say I'm not a copyright attorney, but this is my understanding based on discussions with some of our folks with these expertise at NC State. So when you're presenting in front of a live audience, as a volunteer, as an extension professional, we are generally covered under fair use, which means you can use images for educational purposes and, without necessarily tracking down all those copyright permissions. And I think that would apply too to a recording of a live presentation because, again, that recording is not something that makes those, it's not like a PowerPoint file where somebody would actually go into that PowerPoint file and take that image out and use it somewhere else. So the recording kind of has it embedded in there as part of that live presentation. So I think your hesitations on sharing the recording just around the copyright of the images may not be necessary, but I will check on that for you, John.
Okay, well, thank you for that clarification. And it sounds like a simple thing. Well, just replace the images with something out of Creative Commons or what we've been doing on some of them is taking our own pictures because it works. And the challenge has been finding, often the image that we selected tells a story. And finding a new image that tells the same story is a lot harder than it seems. So thank you for that clarification, Charlotte.
Yeah, I'll verify it though and get back with you too.
Yeah, I just want to say, yes, John. It's been really hard to find images that, like you said, tell the story. And then I have resorted to some of the tool demonstration images. I asked my husband to be my model and I blurred his face so people didn't see him.
Yeah, we have Alison in a couple of hours holding a hoe there, and it really, if you have someone who can take a good photo, it's the way to go. But some of the images, I've spent more hours than I have been willing to record on looking for images.
I understand that feeling. I do appreciate your diligence, all of you, in making sure that those permissions are there for images that you're using. And I will say, good news that the statewide set of materials, that's one thing that takes more time, just like you've noted, to develop those materials so that they can be shared, is making sure all of that, the materials that are used, the images have the right copyright. So that will be built into all of the statewide materials. So that won't be something individual groups using those materials will need to spend time on. I think I'm not seeing new questions. So yeah, I'm not seeing new questions, so I think we'll move forward, Araya. And our next slide, I believe, is simply a reminder that we do have those materials coming up that we are looking for. This is an older version of the slide, but we are looking for people to review it. But this link will get you to the right place where you can sign up to review these materials. And we'd love for you to be part of helping make these available statewide. So we look forward to hearing from folks here. We thought this would be a great test audience for folks who've had a little bit of background to be ready to take on these materials and start using them and give us feedback. The recording for today's webinar will be posted on the EMG intranet, and that's where you can also find recordings from other webinars. If you just wanted to navigate to this link on the site, you would go to the North Carolina site and then go to where it says continuing education, and you would find the Learn, Grow, Share resources there. As I mentioned, it'll include today's recording and the resource document we pulled together based on some of the things that have been mentioned, like the stretching brochure and some of the other materials, and have them available for you to access there. Just a couple of other reminders of upcoming continuing education. Later this month, we will have our season finale of plants, pests, and pathogens. And as usual, we will round out the season with Critter or Not, which is a really fun way to review some of the more interesting cases that come into the Plant Disease and Insect Clinic at NC State, and test your skills on whether what we're being shown by Matt and Mike is a critter, a disease, or something else. So I hope you can join us for that. And then on November 10th, we will have a special continuing education webinar with Hannah Thompson Welch, who is a wildfire mitigation specialist with the North Carolina Fire Service. And she will be talking about fire resilient landscaping with an emphasis on the plants you use and your planting design to reduce the risk of wildfire moving into your landscape if you are in an area where wildfires are an issue. So we might feel safe even if our homes are surrounded by trees, but I think all of us could benefit from this webinar, just learning some of the basics of these fire resilient landscaping practices and strategies, because we don't know when that risk may arise for us. Well, I believe that's our last slide then.
Yeah.
All right, we've got about 5 minutes, it looks like. I'll just scroll through again and see if I see any new questions that have come into chat. Of course, there's lots of compliments, and I just want to second those about how wonderful everybody did, both presenting today and the information you shared being very helpful and being much appreciated, as well as the amazing work you're doing in your counties with this programming. And let's see. Got folks saying they would look forward to making this part of the programming in their county. Got some suggestions that maybe this could become some YouTube videos. And I'm not seeing any other specific questions from our speakers today. I guess we could ask if our speakers, if anything else has come to your mind, if you had one last point you would like to share before we close out today.
Well, Charlotte, I always have a last point. And my last point is that today you heard 3 different versions of the same program. I think the take-home lesson here is that you can adjust this to fit your needs and the needs of your county. You're not locked into doing something that is exactly the way it's presented here. And we all have different takes on what works and what doesn't work. And there's not a right or a wrong. There's just meeting the needs of people to be able to deal with the issues around being gardeners who do not have perfect bodies.
Thank you, John. Steve or Jeanette, you have anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, I mean, John's closing was brilliant. I hate to add to that, to say any more, but something occurred to me when we were talking about the tools and the interest in tools is, in most cases, if not all, in Chatham, we do a tag team. So there's one person who's at the table holding the tool up, maybe demonstrating something, while another person is, talking to the slides, so to speak. So sort of a Vanna White approach. I don't know if you want to say that, but it's just for whatever reason, it works for us. I guess that doesn't have to be that way, but like John said, demonstrating the tool, it's hard to run a clicker and demonstrate the tool and so anyway, that's just an aside.
Thank you, Steve. Any last comments, Jeanette?
No, I think I've said what I wanted to say. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you. And I'll just wrap it up by saying, I think one thing that's so exciting about these materials or this programming is it's an opportunity to combine both your knowledge of gardening and the information you learn as a master gardener volunteer, so the research-based information with your lived experience as a gardener. We're all aging and we're all changing all throughout life. So it kind of lets you bring in, what you're experiencing and what you're finding helps keep you in the garden and share that with others. And, when I see this move between different master gardener volunteer groups, that seems to be part of the spark, part of what really gets people excited about it is, them realizing as a gardener, you have both learned knowledge that you've learned through your master gardener training, and then that experience you have as a gardener staying in the garden that you can bring to people and help them. So yes, we will be sending out the recording and we will be sending out the resource document, and we look forward to hearing from some of you hopefully today who would like to help with reviewing the materials and making them available statewide. And thank you once again to our speakers for their wonderful work and everything they contributed to this programming.